It's a
Hello,
vibe.
it
It's a vibe
is.
right there.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another session of Cosmos DB Study Hall. I'm really excited to be here once again, and really nice to see you, Jay. How are you doing today?
Hi,
Vibing, I
Heini.
guess.
How's it going, everybody? I have not done one of these like this in a few minutes, and so I'm actually really excited to be part of Learn Live. I've done one of these before; they're really fun, and
Mhm.
I am super excited to hear and see what you're going to show us as well. Like we've got like just a really cool presentation, a really great demo, and lots of opportunities for you, our viewers, to send in Q&A. We would love to hear from you, even if you just leave comments and tell us, how cool we are. That would be great. And so, we've got a great session for you. I think you're all going to dig it. I'm going to let you introduce yourself first, Heini, and then
Yes,
and then I will get started.
excellent. So, some of you might have seen me before if you joined some of the previous sessions. I'm Heini Ilmarinen, and I work as a DevOps consultant for a company called Polar Squad here in Finland. And so we focus on DevOps things, as you might guess from the title. I have had the privilege to also work in these projects with Cosmos DB, and it's really an exciting service to be working with, in my opinion, at least. How about you, Jay?
Hey, everybody. My name is Jay Gordon. I am a senior program manager with the Azure Cosmos DB product. I've been working in technology, I think, since, geez, 2001. I think my first root on a system was around 2002. And I love like getting people to understand different technology concepts in a way that's relatable to them. And
Hmm.
this is super relatable, this subject, because one, uh, we all use different types of applications. We're all taking part in this like technological revolution that we're part of. And one of the big things is making sure that we have applications that are always available everywhere. And that's a
Exactly.
great thing about what we're going to be talking about today. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, if you'd like to, you can find us both on Twitter. You got our Twitters right there, also underneath our little pictures. And I think what we can start doing, Haney, is jumping into it. What do you think?
Yeah. Let's get going.
And just so everybody knows, these modules you can follow along at aka.ms/learn live to 2022511A. Rather than just listening to me say it, there's that little QR code on the lower left. You can always use that. Cool. Also, I want to give a big shout out. Why don't you say hello to him, Haney?
Yeah, so behind the scenes, we have also Chris Hyde working as the moderator. So when you send in your questions, Chris will be answering some of those questions for you and then maybe passing some questions on to us as well. And Chris is a fellow Microsoft Data Platform MVP with me. And so really nice to have Chris again. He's been doing this for quite many times. So he's very professional at this already. Nice to have
Awesome.
you there again, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate you helping us out with this session. It's really useful to have people who are helping to moderate and make sure that everything that comes in is interesting. And remember, be cool to one another. That's one of the most important things about being a part of a chat is just make sure you're cool to one another. Uh, and so I want to introduce the module like I just mentioned before. We're going to be talking about configure replication and manage failovers in Azure Cosmos DB. And this is a complete interactive learning exercise. There are tons of videos. And there's sandboxes so that you can actually try this stuff out. So if you go over to the link that you can see up in the corner or use the QR code, you'll find out everything you need to know to get started using Microsoft Learn.
Also, remember that we might be mentioning some things that are not in the module during this session. So also, like, don't get too caught up in reading the module at this point, but follow along. and you might get some extra tips here as well. And what we're, of course, aiming for through these sessions, the study hall for Cosmos DB, is to get certified. There is this really cool new Azure Cosmos DB developer specialty out that has a specific exam that you do that is solely focused on Cosmos DB. And I had a chance to do it, and I really enjoyed it because it is so focused that the exam gets to go really deep into the topics. And that is nice in a way, since many of the Azure certifications are quite wide, and you need to know many different products and so forth. So this just allows you to focus on this particular topic in a very nice way.
People love their certifications, they are been a kind of a mainstay, especially with Microsoft technologies. And it helps give you kind of that stamp of approval when you're looking for career advancement or new careers, or just simply want to feel that what you're doing you have a solid foundation for. And this is kind of like that seal of approval. So check out the information on the actual certification. And don't forget, this is a live interactive session. So please make sure if you head over to the chat, and go and say hi, ask some questions as we go through that material. And we'll answer them as we go through our session. And if we don't get to yours live, someone like our moderator will try to get you answers, and they'll be there. So, we've got Chris. He's our moderator. He's going to be in there. We'll do our best to make sure that any questions you have, we'll get to them. So I want to get into this whole session, but before we do, Heini, I really want to remind people why Azure Cosmos DB. And I think that it helps just kind of level set us back to the big idea. And so modern life is app-centric. Businesses are relying on applications, and increasingly so are homes and personal lives. For businesses, innovation to life, for businesses, innovation is brought to life through the apps we find in new ways to remain competitive and ensure that business continuity during certain times is there and it happens.
Yeah, and of course, when we have applications in use, what we need for it is data. Without any kind of data behind the scenes, these applications make no sense. And really what we're coming more and more into, especially like we see this on the data side all the time, is that we have data coming from different sources. It might be real-time data. And most of the time you have also very different formats available as well. So we have that variety of data increasing, as well as the speed of data as well. So definitely it brings a whole lot of new requirements for the data platforms that we use with our applications.
Yeah, absolutely. Apps exist to use and move data. And without it, apps don't really offer a lot of functionality and usefulness. Cool. Let's keep doing this. So developers have new requirements, and this means that application devs, they need to leverage data in new ways. Cosmos DB helps you get the data replicated all over the globe to provide fast response and failover. There are lots and lots of different ways to support your Cosmos DB installation. You can utilize things like VS Code, as you see in front of you, to be able to use snippets for how to connect, how to create your client, how to do different things, create containers. Really, really useful tools. And we're really focused on driving developers to make use of these new, rapidly changing technologies.
Yeah, and I think we'll see kind of a very cool example of that today, that what we have in Cosmos DB in terms of replication is something quite unique. And really, because we have all these new requirements for modern applications, we also need these databases that are able to also respond to those requirements. So for example, we need to be able to respond to the high volumes of data. And For example, with relational databases, the schema is harder to change. So these NoSQL databases have come in to really allow this dynamic schema and also allow you to develop that schema as you go, and the needs of the application might even change on the go as well.
Yeah, Annie, I really think that NoSQL has helped people build things without as many constraints around how their
Yeah.
data looks once it's and I don't know about you, I have absolutely found a huge amount of benefit in like document databases. Um, I, I
Mhm.
I I used to work in MongoDB years ago, and that's where I got like a huge amount of information related to why we need applications powered by databases that have scalability. And so that's
Mhm.
one of the big things that we'll be talking about. And so if you want to propel your app development into the future, you can do so with Cosmos DB. We're guaranteed speed at any scale, simplified application development thanks to some really great SDKs, mission critical ready. And let me tell you, the SLA, the SLA that we have is pretty unmatched. You're talking the 5 nines of reliability in certain configurations. And then here's the big thing: database management can be difficult. Uh, you're
It
working
can.
with, yeah, you're working with, sometimes gigabytes, sometimes terabytes, and in some cases petabytes of data that actually doing the management, like backups, configuring firewall rules and access control, it can be difficult.
Mhm.
And those that kind of total cost of ownership can really add up, not just in financial dollars, but in human time. And so
Mm,
one of the big
exactly.
things that yeah, one of the great things about Azure Cosmos DB, it's fully managed and it's cost effective. There's an RU model, that reserve unit model that you can work with to be able to actually determine what your utilization is going to look like. There are also ways to use a serverless model, so you're just doing it by an ingestion methodology. What you pay is what you use. So I think there's a lot of great reasons for developers to start really pushing towards NoSQL using Azure Cosmos DB. And here's some really great use cases. Why don't you tell us a little about it?
Yeah. So because of the nature of Cosmos DB, it really fits a lot of use cases in a nice way. So for example, if you are ingesting IoT device telemetry, Cosmos DB is a perfect place to store that data. If you, for example, want to create personalizations and recommendations in your applications, again, the format in which you can store data in Cosmos DB is really a good fit for this. And then, of course, as today we're talking about replication and failovers, this is really ideal for the situations where you need global reach and you really have like mission critical data. As Jay said, like the SLA is so high that it's almost kind of hard to fathom, and the latency that you get and so forth, it's ideal for those particular scenarios. But
Mhm.
you don't have to have that global mission critical applications as well. So it doesn't have to be that. But that is one of the places where you get to use kind of all the bells and whistles that you can find in Cosmos DB. And I
Yeah,
actually, Jay, wanted to ask you because you
sure.
work in the product team and you might have a little bit of a different perspective on Cosmos DB as us who kind of look at it from the outside. What is
Mhm.
kind of your favorite aspect of Cosmos DB? Why you maybe think it's cool or powerful
I
or
love the multiple APIs. I think that
mm,
having different methodologies via using either the core SQL model, um, the being able to configure things using the Apache Tinkerpop, working with Cassandra data if you're doing a
mhm,
column family, and then the MongoDB API. MongoDB is a huge part of application development and has been for the
yeah,
over the years. And so being able to actually provide a way to have people use API for MongoDB, um, gives them the ability to bring applications to Cosmos and not necessarily have to do a lot of refactoring. That's one of the big benefits. So that plus our core SQL API, everybody who gets started gets a kind of a view into why it's become so powerful and useful. And it's mainly because, SQL has been around for a long time. So being able to query your data using SQL in this NoSQL model is huge. So let's not get too hung up on the fact that it's called NoSQL, because in our particular case, we can actually use that SQL query language or kind of a variation on it to be able to, get our documents, read them, sort them, aggregate them, and then eventually make changes to them.
Exactly. So now we're ready to get into the main topic for today's session. And we are kind of have 3 learning objectives that we are aiming for to really nail down after this. So really, we want to learn how to distribute data across global data centers. And yeah, you will see how smooth it is. We will then look at how to configure automatic failover and perform a manual failover as well. And then lastly, we will look at how to configure the Azure Cosmos DB SQL API and then use a specific region from your code. So we kind of get a nice mix here, as Jay was mentioning about the different APIs that are available. These data replication capabilities that we have and the failover capabilities that we have, those are available to all the APIs. So that is kind of across the board. And that is kind of how it is so powerful to use Cosmos DB. You have those managed capabilities right away. And then today we will also focus on the core SQL API specifically with our third learning objective here.
Very cool. Very cool. We've got so much to kind of talk about. We've got,
Yes.
the ability to distribute this data across global data centers, configure automatic failover to do that manual failover, and then also configure the SDK to use specific regions. And so we'll take a look at that as we run through our session. And so one of the things that I want to talk to you about before we kind of jump super deep into the how is the why. And we want to understand replication. And to do that, I want to give you this little example. So Azure Cosmos DB supports turnkey global scale out using any of the available management tools. So that's like SDK, Azure CLI, PowerShell, the portal. And to better understand why scale out is frictionless, it's ideal to discuss how replication works in Azure Cosmos DB. At a minimal configuration, every container has a partition key path defined. This path points to a key value pair in each JSON item, and the value of the partition key is then used to distribute data within a region. Effectively, each container in an Azure Cosmos DB will distribute data using the partition key's value to various physical partitions within the same region. But a physical partition, it's not really just a single physical machine or device. The actual implementation of a physical partition is a replica set. And a replica set is a group of replicas that can dynamically grow and shrink to meet the needs of our database platform. And so each replica set will have other geographically distant replica sets that manage the same partition keys if the data is distributed globally. And these replica sets can then forward data to other replica sets in the different regions to create replica copies of the data. So more data, more good. Azure Cosmos DB account replicates that data within a region in a local distribution among different replica sets, servicing various partition keys values. And if you want to learn more about partitioning, I'm pretty sure we've had some sessions about that before. Take a look at it. Also, there's some great Learn modules around that. Lots of great documentation. So, the direction of the data flow between replica sets is contingent on whether the account is configured with a single write region or a multi-write region. And multi-write allows you to go from these different replica sets and make sure that we can write to them based on where we're geolocated, or our users, I should say, are geolocated.
Yeah, then if we look at the way that you actually enable this data replication across regions, is that, as said, it is a turnkey solution in Cosmos DB. And what that means is you just need to decide which regions you need your application to use. And there is a lot of regions available. We'll take a look a bit later on like how many regions there are available. And you can just decide in which way you want the replication to work, as Jay mentioned. Do you need multiple writes, multiple reads, etc.? And the configuration itself is really easy. While you are creating a new account, there is actually options for this configuration. So there is a global distribution tab that you come across. And there you can enable geo-redundancy if you wish. And then you get to enable multi-region writes if you want multiple regions to be writable for you. If you do choose the geo-redundancy, you then also get to choose, of course, the regions where you want the replication to happen. And then the last option here is the availability zones. And this is referencing to how the Azure data centers are built. Within one region, you actually have multiple availability zones, and those are separate physical locations that do have some distance between them. And if you enable availability zones, you then enable also that your data within a Cosmos DB account is distributed within that region across those different physical locations. And again, this of course brings more resiliency to that data layer that you are handling in Cosmos DB side.
Absolutely, yeah. There's multiple regions that, and within those multiple regions are different availability zones, just helping you create more and more redundancy for your data.
Exactly. And if you think about it, if you have multiple availability zones configured, it is like protecting you in the scenario of where you have one of those data center locations within a region go down. Whereas then if you configure this geo replication, then you are actually protecting yourself against the situation that an entire region would go down. So these are for different scenarios and bringing you that resiliency that you might need. And the nice thing here is that you can configure this either when you're creating the account or after you have created the account. So you can also do this after the fact and actually do this for an existing Azure Cosmos DB account as well. And we can find that configuration in the Replicate Data Globally tab. And there you just get to, it's a very intuitive user interface here where you can check the regions that you want for read regions. And if you want multiple write regions, you can also do it from here. And there are other tools that you can use for configuring this. So the portal is super easy to use, but of course you can use other tools as well, like the Azure CLI, PowerShell. If you're doing infrastructure as code, you can do it with Bicep or Terraform. So you have many, many options in which you can actually configure this in.
Yes, so all my DevOps friends out there, you don't have to just rely on the portal if you want to set up automation to get these things configured. If you want to use something like GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps, you can utilize the tools within them to be able to execute with like Terraform, with Bicep. So cool. The next thing we're going to talk about is evaluating the cost of distributing data globally. And so what do I mean? Well, when you're evaluating the cost of a solution that replicates across multiple regions, you need to calculate the cost as a multiple of a single region relative to the number of replicas. So the core formula is RU's X number of region. For example, consider a solution that uses approximately 1,000 request units per hour. Data is written to one Azure region and then replicated to 5 more regions. And the formula would be something like 1,000 times 1 plus 5 equals 6,000. So the account would be billed for that 6,000 RUs used at a per hour rate.
Yeah, so that is definitely an aspect we need to always consider when defining these replications and so forth. We need to consider the cost factor as well. And then the other side is, of course, how are we going to fail over if something does happen? And of course, we have the option of doing this manually, but then you need to know when you need to do the failover. So you would need to keep track in some way of when that time comes. And you do need to know that if you do have a single write region, then it is of course possible that if an entire regions goes out, then it will result in downtime. And note that it is not very common. It doesn't like happen every day or anything like that. It rarely happens, but you do need to consider that in mind and have some kind of plan in place. And one of those ways is, of course, to define automatic failover policies. And that is just, again, a capability that you would enable in your account. And then you get to set a priority for your regions, in which way they are going to fail over. And so, for example, in this particular example, we have the West US 2, which is the write region. And then there are 2 read regions with East US and UK South. And then you also define the priority of each of those read regions. And if it would be the situation that this our write region, the West US 2, had a data center outage, then the East US would become then the new write region. So it would pick the first priority region from the list that you have defined and fail over to that particular region. So you also want to think like, well, if we have our primary write region, you want to think about, well, what is then, for example, latency-wise, the next possible location where we would want our writes to go to. So you want to also have that in mind when you're configuring these priorities, so you get to keep the best possible experience for your users.
Yeah, a wise person once said something to the effect of everything fails all the time, always. And so, I think it's really important for us to keep in consideration what to do when disaster strikes. And I think that if we talk about failover, it always comes down to disaster recovery sometimes, of being able to say, what do we do when the things that we expect to be online are no longer online? And while, Azure Cosmos DB is fairly reliable and will be online based on that SLA, like I said, 5 nines of reliability. There are instances where things happen, and it is better to be prepared than it is to allow them to dictate the way your customers or app users are eventually going to be impacted. So, and it all comes down to reputation too, Heini. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, if an application is online, then you have a good reputation with the people who expect it. If it's fast, it's reliable, they know that they can always go to it. Like there are, with my Xbox, I know I can go onto it. I can go to one of the apps that I want. And that's another great example of ways that, Cosmos DB, because there's so much Cosmos DB in Microsoft products. So it's worth it to remember, we have to use these services too here at Microsoft, and we have to consider the ways that they're implemented and how to keep things running for you all the time. And to do that, oh, go ahead, sorry.
And I have to say that for Cosmos DB, how you configure this replication is so easy. I don't think there's any other service in Azure that has made it so built in and easy to do. If you, for example, think about the application layer and you would be running your application code in, let's say, an app service, to have that available in multiple regions, you would need to first create 2 different app services in 2 different regions, and then you would have to have processes in place that deploy both of those applications. And then you might need to have something like Traffic Manager in front to have the unified DNS or the domain name for your service. so that you have just one name that you are using to access it. So for especially thinking that this is a data layer, where on the data side, it's not so easy to get replication and synchronization to work in a really fluent way, it is pretty cool that this has been so fully integrated into the Cosmos DB service.
Absolutely. So the next thing we're going to talk about is performing manual failovers, and this is a great way to do some testing, add a little chaos into your life by performing manual failovers when you need to. And so, as part of your organization's disaster recovery exercises, you may wish to test your failover capabilities using Azure Cosmos DB, and you'll see on the right side there are the different regions that we can select that if we want to do manual failover, we can. And the failover process, it requires connectivity between the two regions to ensure that it will succeed and maintain consistency in the data. And for this reason, a manual failover should not be triggered during a service-wide Cosmos DB outage. So if you know that there are multiple regions down, you take a look at the Azure status page and you say, okay, something's really bad is going on. It's probably not the best idea to trigger a manual failover. But there's this concept in chaos engineering that we call game days. And so if you're running a game day, it's worth it for you to kind of say, you know what, today at 4 o'clock, we're going to make a decision to enact a manual failover because we're going to want to see what exactly happens and what the response is from our application when it's not operating the way it expects to. So, that's one of the reasons why people build microservices, so they're loosely coupled from one another, ways to kind of just keep your applications running it by making sure that when disaster occurs that you can get through it. So
yeah, and you also want to check that your people know how to work in that situation. Because what happens that if we're not used to something going wrong, and then when it does hit that one time, it can get a little hectic for people. So everybody needs to know if there's any manual actions that need to be taken, what are those actions, who does it, and so forth. And that way we
fill out your run books. Right?
Exactly.
Cool. So let's keep going, Heini. I know you got something interesting to talk about next.
Yes. So we have now been talking about how we configure the regions within a Cosmos DB account. But then when we are working with a Cosmos DB, for example, using the .NET SDK, which we will be looking at today, we also have the option of configuring which region we want to be using in that case as well. So
yes, please feel free.
So we are going to be looking at the .NET SDK, and it includes all these classes for us built in that we can use with the Cosmos client class. So we are able to configure which region you want the SDK to target for requests. So we have this property called application region that allows us to configure a single region for our requests. Or we can have a application preferred regions list where we can then put a list of preferred regions. So then it is also able to kind of adapt if necessary.
Yeah, really, really useful for people who want to make sure that they have a kind of an array of the preferred regions built into their app, so that if one fails or one should be the priority to write to, if you're doing multi-region writes, that it's all there within the SDK. And so next we have, sure, go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. You can continue.
Okay, sure. And so here we're going to talk a little bit about using C# and setting an application region. The Cosmos Client Options class contains a set of configuration options for your new SDK client instances. Using this class, you can configure the preferred region for your queries and read operations. In this particular example that we have here, the application region property is configured to UK South. So you can see we've got our first line where we're we're establishing a new client, we're specifying the region that we're going to be using, and then we have our connection strings and our options. As an alternative, you can use the Cosmos Client Builder Fluent classes to construct a new client with the application region set. And Heini, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so actually there is this Cosmos regions class available as well that includes then these built-in properties for the different Azure regions. So we can see we kind of have the same setup as in the previous slide, but when we're setting the application region, we're just referencing this regions class and pointing to UK South. So that is just another way to do it, and kind of just, again, lift a little bit of the hard lifting to the built-in libraries and classes. And it doesn't then care if you, for example, you don't have to worry about typos or anything like that, that you set a complete region that doesn't even exist.
Very cool. Let's keep going, right?
Yes.
So, we can go here, we can set a preferred application property to use a set of prioritized list of the different geo-replication regions that we're going to use in the SDK. In this first example, what we can do is we can utilize something like the values of East Asia, South Africa North, and US West, and a collection is then used to assign the application preferred regions property. If you want to take a look at the exact code for this, check out the module. There's some really great examples of how this is implemented within your application using the SDK.
Yes, and actually within the exercise that we're going to begin, we'll also get a chance to look at how we would configure this. So remember that if you follow along with a module, you will have a built-in sandbox that you can get. You just need to follow along, you get a button that you need to click, and you'll get a sandbox environment that will not cost anything to you. So that is a really convenient way to work with it. But of course, since we're talking about Azure, I can also have all the exercise code on my laptop, and I can work with my Cosmos DB account in my own subscription as well. So you can take either of those approaches as you work through the exercises. And if you use the lab environment, then you have all the tools available that you need already. If you want to use your own laptop, you then of course need to have Visual Studio Code, for example, to work with the code, and then you need your own Azure subscription. But either way works, of course.
Very cool.
Yes. So what we're going to do is I did a little prepping beforehand, because the thing is that some of the steps that are in the exercise take a bit of time, and it would require us to wait around for 10 to 15 minutes. So I have created a Cosmos DB account for us for this exercise. And I created just a standard Cosmos DB account with a SQL API. And I started without any regions configured. And once I had created this, I can go into the replicate data globally options here. And this is where you have all the options available for the different regions. And you actually have this nice map available as well, where you can see where are these different regions located. And when I was configuring this, I just added two different read regions here. And I'm just going to make it a little smaller here. So we have one write region. I chose Sweden Central. I'm in Finland, so that is a location that is very close to me. And then for the read regions, I just wanted as big kind of global reach as possible. So I went with a location in Canada Central and then with a region in Australia East. And these are now the two read regions. You can notice that there is also this option for the multi-region rights. So if you would want multi-region rights, you would enable that. And then you are able to manage whether you want all of these regions to be writable as well. But we'll just disable it for now. We'll just have one write region and then 2 read regions that we are working with here. And this is the step that can take a little time to get done. So if you change the configuration, if you choose a different region, it will take a little bit of time. If you do want to add another region after the fact, you can just click a region here and it'll add it on your list. And all you need to do at that point is click the save and off you go. So that's how easy it is to set up the replication. It can't really get easier than that, can it? I don't think so. All right. So what we're going to be doing now is we, of course, want to work with these different regions and see how they work. Mm-hmm. First of all, we do need to have some data here. And we are going to go into the Data Explorer here and just create a container because we don't have one yet. And so first, remember now again, the Cosmos DB structure, we have the account, then we have the database, and then we have the containers. So we're just going to create a new database. And I should have copy-pasted and not typed, because if you talk and type at the same time, it's different.
And it's one of the most nervous and nerve-wracking things in the world to actually have other people watching you type as you do it. I've done a bunch of live show performances in front of crowds. Matter of fact, Jason, our producer, and I used to do a bunch of Microsoft Ignite the tours. And we would travel from place to place. And one of the things that was always frustrating was okay, you got to watch me type in this demo.
Yeah, exactly. It's surprisingly difficult to type at times. So as we're creating this new database and container, we get to kind of remind ourselves of the different settings that are available. So remember that you can configure the throughput either so that you have throughput for a specific container, or you have throughput on the database level where it then shares it across the different containers. In this case, we're just going to have one container, so we can click that. We're going to create a products ID, and then our partition key is going to be category ID. And we're going to go with manual throughput. So remember, again, you have 2 options, autoscale and manual. With autoscale, you set the maximum RUs that you might want to, you don't want to go beyond that. With manual, you set a specific throughput, and then that is what you have available. With autoscale, it also kind of then, if you're not using the resources, it also means that you don't have to pay for those. So particularly if you have a workload that varies a lot of how much resources it needs, then it's good to go with the autoscale options there. But we'll go with the manual.
For costs, you know what I mean? Autoscale also, if you have a smaller distribution and you don't necessarily want to, and it doesn't get a lot of traffic. I think one of the good things that you can do is, let's say you're going to get some small particular types of spikes and you want to build your RUs for that. That's perfectly reasonable. If you're in a situation, and Heini, thank you for giving me a space to do this. I wanted to give you a chance to breathe.
Thank you.
No problem. If you're using the consumption model with serverless, it's kind of like that, pay what you use kind of cloud methodology. We want to make sure that we're cost efficient in what we do. And we also want to make sure that we're not over provisioning. So if I have say a database with 1,000 documents and maybe they equal 100 megabytes, we don't want to pay, and we know we're not going to get a ton of traffic. We don't necessarily want to configure a large amount of request units because in the end, we'll just end up paying for them and not really getting the full benefit of using them. But if we go with the serverless model, we can go ahead and say, let's step back a second and let's say that what we need and when we need it, we'll just pay for it when it's time. And that'll handle things like spikes. So you don't necessarily have to be too concerned with having the right amount of request units. So great way of setting up your Cosmos DB apps.
Exactly. And particularly this becomes more even prevalent when we have multiple regions, because that also then multiplies the costs for us as well. So really important to keep in mind. All right, with this particular case, we're going to go with a manual throughput. We'll keep it at the minimum that we are able to have, so the 400, and then that is all we need to configure at this point. And so we'll create that new container, and then we also want to create a new item there. So we'll give that just a second to complete there, and then we have a JSON item that we are going to create here as a document in our container. And let's see if this is one of those things that we have to wait for a moment. Normally, this doesn't take too long, but you know,
there we go. Okay.
Occasionally it can. Yeah, right away when I started.
Right, we got the Cosmic Work database with the products container.
Yes. And then in the items portion, we're able to see, like, do we have any items? But we haven't uploaded anything. So to do that, we would need to, I don't want to do it this way, but I want the new item version, actually.
Yep, and it gives you that little ID area there that you can change, or you can allow it to be automatically configured for you.
Exactly. So here we have our format. We have it sounds like a bike part here. So we have a road pedal. It is a component by category. And then we also have a category ID. And remember that for our partition key, we set the category ID when we set this. So what we need to do is that we need to click save to have that uploaded. And now we can see that there has been some of these kind of system values added as well. So those are the ones that you can see the underscore in front of them, the value names, and you can kind of identify them from there. And of course, normally you would probably not be uploading items manually, especially not a big amount. Those items would be uploaded by your application itself. But since we today want to specifically focus on the region and how we can specify which region we want to use, this is just for that example. And I always want to encourage you, as you're working through the exercises, feel free to kind of play around a bit, especially if you're using the sandbox. It's like a perfect opportunity. Create some new items yourself and kind of beef up the exercise yourself, because they are quite straightforward, especially this one. So you can kind of play around a bit and see where the limitations are. And just that way you will learn a little more as you're working through this.
And the sandboxes are free, so there's no charges that you're incurring on your own. And to be honest with you, it's super simple. It's right in the Learn module. You just click activate, it goes ahead, you get a certain number of sandboxes every day, and you're able to complete the exercise without spending a dime. And I think that or whatever your local currency is, and you're able to really get all the benefits without having to worry about any cost associated with it. So you can learn for free.
Exactly. That is always useful. And so now we want to build on this application portion that we have available here. We do first want to build this. So you see we have a script.cs file here. That is our C# code. There's not much there yet. We will get to filling this out the right way in a moment. And then we have this app.csproj file that is, for example, adding the package reference there. So let's just build this so that we can get to the next point after it has been built. So we might notice right away that we do need the Cosmos DB endpoint and we need the key. So those are things that we would need to fetch from the portal. We can leave the build running there as we go and fetch those. So we can, for example, find the keys here in the options. And I'll just grab the primary key. You might have followed along with some of the other modules. There is better ways to connect with your Cosmos DB account than using the master key. So keep an eye out for that. And let's put in the key here. And then we also want our Cosmos DB URL. So let's go over there and let's put that here.
And the endpoint is just a fully qualified domain name that every single account gets set up, and it's all over SSL. So you have some end-to-end encryption, and data is also encrypted at rest. So
exactly.
Your data is protected, and that's always super important. And these keys that Heini's showing you, like, they're able to be rotated. So and they're all handled by Azure, so you don't necessarily need to do your own key management. But there are options that if you want to provide your own key management, you can utilize RBAC, things like that.
Exactly. All right, then the focus of this session is the regions. So I imagine we would want to configure some regions. And in the slides, we looked at the options where you configure a single region. So let's just take a look here that we are actually configuring a list of regions. So here we want to put in the different regions that we added. So you can see you want to put in your write region, read region 1 and read region 2. If you can't remember anymore, you can always come back to the replicate data globally. I was a little concerned there for a moment when I couldn't see that. I was like, what's happening here? So you can just go back and forth and copy paste. I, for example, had Sweden Central as my main write region. And then I have Canada Central and Australia East. I'll just try to remember that so I don't quite have to hop back and forth so much. All right, so we have 3 regions in this regions list available, but then we do want to then use this in our Cosmos client. And we need to set this in our Cosmos client options. And there we have the application preferred regions. So remember, we had 2 ways in which we can do this. So we can have the application region or the application preferred region. Both ways work. So we have those in there. And then we, of course, want to actually use this client. So we would then put in a line where we are using this Cosmos DB client. And there we want to configure which endpoint are we using, which key, and which options are we using. So the options, for example, is referencing this previous block here. And then we do have, when we want to work with the container, you might remember from the previous episodes that we have all kinds of different things that we can do to communicate with our Azure Cosmos DB data from the code. In this case, we'll just do so that we connect to our database and container, and then we read one specific item from there. So as the first option or the step, we need to first get the container that we want. So we are referencing that, yes, we want the CosmicWorks database and then the products container from there. So those are the 2 things we need to specify in this get container command. And then we want to run the read item async. And note here that we do need the ID of the item that we are reading. So when we're using this particular way of fetching data, this is what we need. So this is something that we have in the item that we created in Cosmos DB. So if we go back into the Data Explorer and we look at that one item that we have available there, we can see that this is actually referencing this particular one. In this case, we have just this one, so we're more looking at the region side, but to be able to fetch this item, we have both the ID in there, plus then, if you look closely, we also have this partition key that we're using to get that item from there. So good to note that.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, to kind of get some feedback to ourselves, like what are we actually doing here and what did we get? We'll just add a few lines to just get some output into our console. So we're going to write a line that first prints the resource ID. Then we are going to get this, print this line just as a title to have response diagnostics JSON. And then we're going to get this thing called diagnostics from our response. And we'll see in a moment what that actually contains. What is it that is in there? We'll be able to see that. And yeah, that's actually all we have to do. I'm a little, oh, there's a white space there. That's nice. I was like, I don't think there should be anything wrong there, but yes, white spaces, we don't want those. This is our application, so then we are ready to run this. And if we kind of think about it, what should we get? We should get the particular item that we uploaded in our Cosmos DB account previously, and we should get this diagnostic JSON out from that item as well. So let's just do .NET run, and we'll be able to see the output for this one and see what we get out. And specifically, we want to take a look at this diagnostic JSON that we are getting from the response. That is giving us information about the item that we're fetching. And here, it's not the best format, but we can see that there is a lot of things here. So for example, it is telling like how many regions did it connect to, many things. But if we specifically look at a property called HTTP response stats, that is where we will be able to find then the request URI, and that should include the name that we configured earlier. And you can, for example, see that we also see the regions here. So let's see if I can just here, target endpoint. We can, for example, from this target endpoint see that it is connecting to the Australia East endpoint, and it is grabbing the first one from the list of regions that we configured there. You could, of course, pull this JSON out and put it to, for example, Notepad and have it in a bit of a nicer format for you to be able to kind of look a little deeper into it. But we can see that it is actually connecting the Australia East endpoint here to fetch our particular item from there. So if we kind of change the configuration of our application, then we could see it, for example, connecting another endpoint instead. And again, when you're doing the exercise, feel free to play around on your own, test different configurations, test also the other option of setting the application region that was described previously, and just setting a single region there. So make sure to test out all that.
And these SDKs, all of them, the different ones for different particular languages, whether you're using .NET, C#, whether you're using Node.js, Java, there are, and even Go, there are lots of really useful docs that are on the Microsoft Docs website that you can go there. You can start keeping your eyes on what changes might happen in the SDKs, how you can implement them, just lots and lots of great information that if you need it, we've done our best to get it to you.
Yeah, excellent. And so really by looking at this sample from the SDK perspective, we get the full picture of how we go into the account itself and configure the replication there, and then how we are actually able to work with those configured regions from the .NET SDK. So we do need to have those both aspects that we think about and how we also configure everything from the SDK side. All right,
Very cool.
That's all I wanted to show you at this point. You now have the information that you need to get going on your own as well. And I think we do have still at least something coming up.
Yeah. You know what we have next? We have the knowledge check. We're going to test our knowledge in the chat. So what does that mean? We're going to bring out some questions. We've got 2 really great questions for you. What I'd love you all to do is answer them in the comments section. The polls are out there. They're live. If you go over to aka.ms/learn-live, you'll be able to use the chat feature there. And if you go to aka.ms/polls, you can start taking the poll to be able to answer the question. And so why don't we get to the first question? What are you saying?
Yeah, let's get to it.
Great.
All right.
So I want to ask you, let me ask you first, if you don't mind.
All right.
Excuse me. So you've created a brand new Azure Cosmos DB account with a right region in West US and 2 regions in UK South and Japan East. You have made no further configuration changes from the default configuration for a new account. There's a current data center in West US. What will Azure Cosmos DB do as a failover action? Will it fail over to A, UK South, B, nothing, or fail over to Japan East? So why don't we give everybody a chance to vote on whether or not they think it's A, B, or C. And we will continue to give you all great information. So it sounds like, based on what I'm hearing, people are going with B, nothing. And I want to take a look and see if that's the answer. So we're going to give you all just another minute or so. And in that minute, I also wanted to remind you that if you want to get in touch with us, we have our Twitter handles right underneath us. You can continue the discussion on what we're talking about today. Just go ahead and reach out. And if you want to also, there is a great Twitter account for Azure Cosmos DB. If you go to @Azure Cosmos DB on Twitter, you're going to be able to get all the information that comes along as far as new features, enhancements, blog posts. We have some live shows that we do. Mark Brown does Cosmos DB TV Live, which I think people would really get some great education from. And we even have a global user group that you can go to. So I've given you all a couple minutes to go ahead and answer this question. Stay on aka.ms/polls because we have another one coming for you. So let's see our answer. Heini, it was nothing.
And that makes sense, because when we were talking about this, remember that to have a failover happen, we need to configure a failover policy. So unless we do that, and with a new account, if you haven't done and configured that failover policy, then nothing is going to happen. So we do need to enable this failover capability for our account. It doesn't come automatically, even though it is automatic failover policy, but it is the policy that then will enable you to, for example, choose that you want to configure the failover go primarily to UK South And remember, the failover policy was the one where you have the regions and then the priorities for those regions.
Well, we got our first question in, and Heidi, I want you to ask me the next one. Like,
Yes.
let's switch off here, and so we'll go to our next question. Why don't you take it?
All right, so which property of the Cosmos Client Options class in the .NET SDK for Azure Cosmos DB SQL API is used to configure a list of preferred geo-replication regions? Tricky. There is a few options there. So is it application region? Is it application preferred regions? Or is it connection mode?
Well, while we covered this, and yeah, we definitely covered this, and I want to give our audience just a minute to be able to provide their answer. Just so you know, all of you got the previous question right. All the answers came in as nothing, and everybody was right. So good job, team. I am very proud of you all. You're learning as we do this. And remember, if you have any questions, maybe you have a story to share, why don't you go ahead and put it in the chat after you vote on the answer to this question. And we will do our best to kind of share your story, because I think that your experiences, besides ours, it's super important. It's really useful for people to know. So I think, Heini, we should give them the answer. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's good.
Very cool. So I think it's B, because I remember before the application region was for a single and application preferred regions was for multiple, but let's take a look and see what. Yeah, B. Boom.
Excellent. Nice.
The application preferred regions property sets a list of regions in the priority order. So if you remember before, he picked like one particular region at the top, and then we had two more. And so it's going to go in that kind of hierarchical like method. It's going to say, all right, well, the first one is East US. The next one is UK South. The next one may be Japan East. We want to just be able to create these in an array so that if we need to, we'll always have these regions available to us. So we'll make sure that our data is always being right and read. So good job, team. We are just about through everything, but we're going to start wrapping up. And the best way to wrap up, I think, is with a summary. What do you think?
I think you're very right. So let's just summarize what we went through today. So we looked at how distribution works and how you distribute data across global data centers. And we saw it. It's pretty easy with Cosmos DB. There's not a lot to do. You just give whichever regions you want to use. But do keep in mind, you have to think about this from the application perspective. Even if you configure multiple regions, you need to make sure that your application layer will also be available across those multiple regions. Well, of course, it will still help to have the data replicated. Secondly, we looked at how to configure automatic failover and how to perform a manual failover as well. So we have those two methods for failover, automatic and manual. And for the automatic, we need the policy in place. And then lastly, which we looked at with the exercise as well, is that we looked at how to configure the Azure Cosmos DB SQL API .NET SDK to use a specific region or to use a list of regions as well.
Very, very cool. And then if you'd like to learn more information about the subjects that we discussed, so distribute your data globally with Azure Cosmos DB, and then how to manage an Azure Cosmos DB account in the portal, you can go to this URL or use this QR code. You can see more about these topics that we discussed today. Keep the knowledge coming, because you don't want to stop. You want to keep learning, continuous learning. That's a huge part of modern technology professional workload. Like, you're not just, writing code. You're also making sure that you're learning about new things that you can utilize in order to build the best products for the people and deliver the value that they expect. And so if you go to aka.ms/learnlive-20220511A, okay, Laurent, how about that URL? You can complete interactive learning exercises, watch videos, and practice and apply your new skills. If you don't want to just listen to me read out the URL, like I said, there's that QR code right down there. You'll also be able to go to the YouTube video of this and go back to these sections and be able to take a look. So you can use Learn to do these interactive learning exercises with a sandbox. There was a VM that you could have also utilized to run this demo that comes with all the instructions. It gives you an Azure Cosmos DB account. It gives you it even has VS Code installed on it. It's so cool. Check it out. And you can practice and apply these new skills that you've learned. So take a look at the module and don't miss.
Yeah, remember that this is actually a 24 episode series. So you also want to join the next session as well. And this will be looking into how to use consistency models in Azure Cosmos DB SQL API. And this is actually one of the very, very important topics to consider, especially if you are replicating across regions. Consistency determines how then that data gets replicated. So really important topic and really builds on this particular session as well. And remember, we actually have a little break now. The next session isn't until June 1st. So it won't be next Wednesday as usual, but June 1st.
Easy to remember. Here in the States, we got Memorial Day weekend coming up. It's a time for us to kind of prepare for the summer. So you can go right into June after Memorial Day weekend and learn about these consistency models. And reminder that you can get certified. Go to the URL and you can find out about taking this exam to measure your ability, accomplish the following technical tasks to design and implement data models, design and implement data distribution, integrate an Azure Cosmos DB solution, optimize an Azure Cosmos DB solution, and maintain an Azure Cosmos DB solution. And like I said, it's that stamp of approval that says, I know this. I took the learning. I took the exam and I came out of it with a nice certificate that you could put on your LinkedIn. You can share with your family and friends, and everybody can know that you are an Azure Cosmos DB developer specialty certified user, developer, whatever, you're human being. Anyway, Heini, this was so much fun.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you'd like to get in touch with you, Heini, what's the best way?
Just send me a message on Twitter or find me on LinkedIn. Same name as on the Twitter handle. So Twitter, LinkedIn, both work very well.
And the same with me. If you're on LinkedIn or you're on Twitter and you'd love to reach out, I want to hear your stories. I'm always trying to find people to share how they've succeeded using Azure Cosmos DB. And so, feel free to get in touch with me. Let me know what you've been doing. I really want to learn. I want to share your story. So reach out to me. Twitter, my DMs are open. LinkedIn, I'm always happy to respond to people. So, Heini, are you ready to kind of close up this show?
Yes. It was fun, but everything comes to an end. So yeah, I think we're ready.
Sure, everything does. So everybody, I am so thankful that you were taking part in this session. Make sure you share the recording with your friends, your family, your loved ones, and your pets, because they need to learn these things too.
Yes, definitely.
So you have any closing words for us, Heini?
I just want to say that thank you for joining. It was so fun to do this with you, Jay. It was a pleasure. Make sure to join the next session as well. And I just wish you all a good day or good night if you're more on my time zone. It was fun. So
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. Heini, it was so much fun to work alongside with you. I'm hoping that we can do more together in the future.
yeah.
But, that's the end for us today. So thank you for watching this Learn Live study hall. Make sure you tune into the next one. But until then, we're going to give you the big wave goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Be good to one another. Take care.